Hi again, and now I'll talk about the idea of building a fortress. What's a fortress? Simply put, it's a position on which the side having an advantage cannot make any progress, cannot basically win the game. In fact, we already saw this idea in some positions. For example, in this position that we analyzed when we talked about stalemate, here black didn't take the pawn, but in the end white sacrificed the pawn to reach a stalemate position. But also we analyzed this idea that if black takes the pawn, black has a huge material advantage, but black cannot win the game because the king will stay in the corner, and this position we can see it as a fortress for white. Now this idea, like any other idea, can definitely get more complicated. Let's take a look at this position. Here it is black to play, and black's position looks desperate because this knight on h3, it's about to fall in a way because this bishop is controlling the knight. So white has an idea to come and pick up the knight, and after losing the knight we see that there's no a or h pawn or no rook pawn, so there doesn't seem to be any idea of a fortress. In fact, in this position black, who is a very strong player, one of the top players from the US, resigned. But actually here black had a fantastic idea, which is to try to bring the king to the corner even though it's not a rook pawn, and after the move king to d6, king to g4, king to d7, black would give the knight, and after king to c8 we plan to come to the corner. Now if white allows that, then after the move king to g4, king to b8, king to f5, white would try to bring the king to try to pick up the pawn, and then this is an easy win. But here white would be unable to win this pawn because after bringing the king there's no way to progress for white. Let's say after the move king to c7 or king to c8, it would just be a stalemate. So this is a funny position on which we are not talking about a rook pawn. Here white even has two pawns, but white cannot progress because of this idea of stalemate. Probably black, who as I said is a very strong player, saw this idea, but he was probably afraid of the move bishop to f4 here because this would stop the king from coming to the corner. But even here there's no way for white to progress, so this is quite a very unique position. Black would keep the king near the corner, trying to reach the corner, and after white brings the king, let's say here white can wait, and after king to c8, king to e6, king to d8, let's say bishop to e5, trying to bring the king, king to c8. There's also no other way to bring the king without giving a stalemate. Let's say king to e7, and it's a stalemate. So there's no way for white to win this pawn and win the game. Another common idea might occur in positions on which you have a queen against a rook. Here we see that white has a huge material advantage because we have 3 pawns and a queen against rook and 3 pawns. On the other hand, white has these weird 3 pawns, triple pawns, and importantly, white cannot create a pass pawn, at least not easily, because we have this pawn on b5 stopping the 3 pawns. And here black continued king to g8, and after king to d3 a draw was agreed. Probably this was a bit premature, but the main point is here that if white cannot create a pass pawn, then the only way for white to win would be to give a checkmate. And in order to give a checkmate, a queen alone is not going to be able to give checkmate. That's why white has to bring the king. But black has the rook on the 5th rank trying to stop the king from entering the position. So if white could bring the king, let's say to e7, then this would be probably an easy win. But here white cannot bring the king to black's territory. And having this idea in mind, the easiest way for black to keep the fortress is to keep the rook defended, definitely. Let's not play something like queen to g5 because he would just lose immediately after the check. But if we just keep on h5 and f5, then this is an easy way to draw the game. White might try some tricks, so that's why possibly white could have continued playing. But let's say after king to d4, rook to f5, even if white tries king to c5 ideas to go for this pawn ending that we will have to calculate, maybe the easiest thing is to keep the rook on h5 in that case. So let's say queen to c5, we can even play rook to h5 because here if white takes, this pawn is very strong. So this position should normally be a draw. And if white gives a check, then we would just keep the king on g7, g8, just keep the position, and this would be a fortress for black. Speaking about rook against queen positions, sometimes even a pawn and a rook can hold the position against a queen. In this position, black again would play this similar idea, rook to e6, rook to g6, whenever white doesn't give a check, and white's king cannot enter the position. We are again having the rook on the 6th rank, trying to stop the king from entering the position and give checkmate to black's king. So in this case, the draw is fairly easy. On the other hand, black should not try to get ambitious here and push the pawn. Let's say after queen to d4, f6 or f5 trying to advance the pawn, this would be a very bad idea, because here white will start giving checks and attacking the pawn from behind, and this would be a losing position for black, because in the end white would manage to get the pawn and play queen against rook, which would be winning for white. So keep in mind the idea here that we're trying to build up a fortress, not to win the game, so we should keep the fortress. That's why we play waiting moves here. So keep in mind this very important idea of a fortress, either to save a position or whenever you have a material advantage as a defensive resource for your opponent.